Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Last of the Elvis Ninja Robots by Michael Stevens, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Call from Green Bank. Birds cheerfully flitted about as white dandelion puffs wafted along the mild summer breeze, meandering along over rolling green hills and past a colossal 300-foot wide satellite dish. This tranquil scene was juxtaposed by the frenzied commotion inside a nearby facility. The aforementioned satellite dish, a radio telescope operated by the Green Bank Observatory in eastern West Virginia, had just received a very unusual signal from a neighboring galaxy. The signal triggered a number of flashing lights and beeping monitors inside the building, which in turn sent a number of scientists into a tizzy. As the encoded signal represented the first indisputable evidence of intelligent life outside of Earth, the scientists were desperate to decipher it before anyone else. They spared no effort, employing an array of specialized algorithms and AI models that ran on the world's most sophisticated computers. They even tried multiple calls to a toll-free psychic hotline and a decoder ring found in a Cracker Jack box. After months of negligible results, some of the scientists resorted to crowdsourcing solutions. They parsed out snippets of the signal without identifying its extraterrestrial source to various hacker forums where computer programmers competed to solve coding problems. It was precisely these problems, a set that had vexed the online hacker community for weeks, that drew the singular focus of 15-year-old Lexi Ames. For Lexi, it wasn't the small prize money she coveted. It was all about bragging rights. The list of hackers that signed up for this particular coding challenge read like a who's who of the cyber world. There was Will Code for Bling, Moxioron, Lord Moldywort, Barth Raider, and her nemesis, Bread Pirate Roberts, aka Travis Harrison. They all had been flooding the comments section with complaints about how hard the problem set was. Some even threatened to give up, claiming it was unsolvable. If Lexi were the first to submit the correct answers, then that would surely shut up Travis and the other online trolls who told her girls couldn't code. It might even sway her mother, who, in a bit of an overreaction to a teeny tiny little incident, had forbidden Lexi to spend any more time programming and made her promise to focus only on her schoolwork. Speaking of schoolwork, Lexi questioned if she shouldn't have stayed up so late the other night coding and maybe studied even just a little bit for her biology exam. Now she would have to endure another lecture from her mom about doing better in school. She sulked up the stairs to her bedroom, slammed the door, and cast her ridiculously heavy backpack onto the carpet, completely spewing its contents. Lexi huffed. The contents sprawled across the floor that would take decades for a future anthropologist to analyze. Probably. Among the items were a hair tie, a used tissue, one tube of mango-flavored lip gloss, a tampon, a phone charging cable, a burner phone, a drink frother, approximately 11 pens of various colors, a laptop, 4 large textbooks, 3 notebooks, and numerous papers, including her graded biology test. Lexi impulsively threw the tampon back into the backpack and glared at the test paper. Emblazoned at the top was a large D, dramatically scrawled in red ink. The D seemed to scowl back at her like Ms. Snodgrass, her biology teacher. Another huff. How, Lexi fumed, was learning about plant propagation supposed to help her be a better programmer? There was zero chance she would be a biologist or a farmer or whatever it was plant people did. The only plants she ever knew died a lonely death of neglect in the windowsill, on the kitchen counter, or wherever her mom had sentenced the plant to languish. A uniquely gifted computer programmer, Lexi was otherwise typical of many young Earth women. That meant she was fraught with existential dread and insecurities due to irrational expectations of herself, the unqualified criticisms of her peers, and her perceived insignificance in the world. As if that weren't enough, she now would have to face the indignities of a D in biology and worse still, the wrath of her mother. Ah, her mom. Lexi had established a strict policy to keep things from her mother. However, in this case, per policy rule number 142, she would have to tell her about the test score. Her mom, in turn, would most certainly freak. She would tell her mom eventually, conceded Lexi. At the moment, however, she had more pressing matters to attend to. She took the hair tie and pulled her mousy brown hair back into a ponytail, leaving behind a couple of rogue tangles that teased the cheeks of her pale face. She grabbed her laptop, stepped over the other items littered about the floor, and plopped down on her unmade bed. That reminded her. She had promised her mother that she'd clean up her room. That also would have to wait for later. Lexi pulled at the sleeves of her green hoodie as she checked on the results of her latest submission to 2Bits, a popular freelance project board for hackers. She smiled when she saw the gloriously green checkmark. Accepted. Normally, there would be little suspense for Lexi after completing an assignment. She had an extraordinary knack for solving problems, particularly those involving computer programming. Computer code was written in a hierarchical structure in 2 dimensions. However, Lexi seemed to almost see it in 3 dimensions. She possessed an uncanny ability to see patterns, connect dots, and solve puzzles before most people finished wondering where to begin. Lexi was pretty intelligent for a human. Still, the last few projects had been increasingly challenging for her. The most recent set was exceptionally so. It was unlike anything Lexi had ever seen. It took her days to solve, and she wasn't even sure if the answers she provided were correct. Indeed, her solutions to the enigmatic problems were correct. She smiled, envisioning the moment she revealed to Travis and his online clique that she, the girl they wouldn't let into their stupid coding club, was the one that solved the challenge. Lexi's smile quickly flattened into a frown as she glanced at her notifications. There were 7 messages from Watts Wilson, the project owner. Something was wrong. She clicked the latest message. Please call ASAP. This is extremely important. She gulped. She checked a few more messages, same thing, but one added, can we set up a video call? And another said, we tried calling. We really need to speak to you. Lexi wondered who was we. No project owner has ever called her. She fended off the unhelpful thoughts that ran rampant through her brain. Had she possibly gotten mixed up with the wrong people and might be in some kind of trouble again? Lexi's biology test score would be the least of her worries if her mom found out about this. She snatched her burner phone off the floor. It was an older model, so out of fashion that it had become fashionable again. She flipped it open. 5 text messages, all from Watts, and 3 voice messages. Who left voicemails? Lexi nervously fumbled with the phone, trying to figure out how to retrieve the recordings. She listened to the last one first. A woman with a very proper British accent said, Alex, hi, this is Bianca Snow with SETI at the Green Bank Observatory. SETI? Green Bank Observatory? The stalking panic inched a little closer as Lexi peppered herself with thoughts and questions. A bank observer? That could not be good. Had she unknowingly been working on encryption of financial records? Definitely not good. Her anxiety morphed to disbelief as the recording continued. I'm calling. Well, first, I want to personally thank you. Your work with Watts has been invaluable. It's extraordinary. In fact, we are. Look, I'd like to discuss. I'd like to talk to you about joining our team, taking on a more formal role. We could arrange something full-time, part-time, whatever works for you. Well, that wasn't what Lexi was expecting. She was pretty sure the woman just offered her a job. Could it be a scam of some kind? The message continued. I believe Watts has shared with you that we're now facing some considerable time constraints. So please call back soon so we can discuss this further. Again, we're really pressed for time, so please call as soon as possible. Lexi replayed the messages a couple of more times, then sat perplexed. Normally, a job offer for someone desperate to make money would be considered a good thing. And making money doing something they loved would be positively fantastic. For Lexi, however, there were a couple of problems, the main one being that Lexi, a 15-year-old girl, had been posing online as a 25-year-old man named Alex Belvedere. That was all the fault of Travis Harrison, a senior at Lexi's high school, leader of the Bite Me Coders Club, and a relentless cyberbully. He and his cronies had mocked and harassed Lexi on hacker forums and social media until she finally retaliated. which was how she got in so much hot water and was nearly expelled from school, which related to problem number 2. Lexi had been coding behind her mother's back and shuddered at the thought of how her mom might react if she found out. Lexi looked up Green Bank Observatory and was instantly relieved to learn it was an actual observatory, as in for looking at planets or stars or whatever they did at observatories. More importantly, it had nothing to do with banks. Apparently, Green Bank was what those with naming rights had given to the town where the observatory was located. Lexi then searched for the woman who had left the voicemail. Bianca Snow was a xenolinguistics professor at University of California, Berkeley SETI Research Center. Lexi looked up a couple more unfamiliar terms, and she was immediately plunged into a dizzying world of bewilderment and intrigue. Xenolinguistics, she learned, involved languages spoken by non-human intelligences, and SETI stood for a search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Things were beginning to get weird. Lexi quickly searched for Watts, kicking herself that she hadn't done so before. He was a computer science graduate student at Berkeley, working on a PhD in something called technosignatures. She looked that up. Technosignatures were signs of technology used by extraterrestrial civilizations. Okay, take a breath, Lexi, she said to herself. The words non-human and extraterrestrial swirled around in her head along with endless questions, like how were the 2-Bits projects related to aliens? Had she been talking to E.T. the whole time? What did he say? Stressing over what to do next, Lexi sorted through her options. Calling Watts or Bianca Snow seemed out of the question. How could she possibly talk to them when they thought she was a man? Maybe she could disguise her voice, but what about video? They sounded desperate, so maybe they wouldn't care if she was in high school. But even if they didn't freak out, her mom most certainly would. Disobeying her about coding would be bad enough, but talking to aliens? That would probably absolutely send her over the edge. Probably. No patterns presented themselves to Lexi to help solve this puzzle. She could not come up with any answers that didn't result in her abject humiliation, possible legal problems, and a permanent grounding. So Lexi did what any teenager would do and decided she would just ignore the whole matter and hope for it to go away. It did not.